You never think it'll happen to you. You see the news stories, the warnings online, people breaking in, home invasions, things going wrong in the middle of the night. But you always assume you're safe. That kind of thing happens to other people, not you. I thought that too, until the night I heard the front door open. I live alone. It's a small place, nothing fancy. Just a modest 2-story house on a quiet street. I work from home, so I don't go out much, and I've always been careful. Doors locked, windows shut. That night was like any other. I had just finished dinner and was curled up in bed, watching a dumb show on my laptop. It was past midnight. The house was silent except for the hum of my ceiling fan. Then I heard it, a soft creak. At first I thought it was just the house settling, old pipes maybe. But then came the unmistakable sound of a door clicking open, the front door. My stomach dropped. I knew I had locked it. I sat up, heart hammering. For a few seconds I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Maybe I left the TV on downstairs. Maybe the wind had knocked something over. Then, a footstep. A slow, deliberate step on the hardwood floor. Someone was inside my house. I felt frozen, my mind racing. I didn't have a weapon. No baseball bat, no gun, nothing. My phone was right beside me. But if I called 911, he'd hear me. Another footstep. Closer. I strained to hear, barely breathing. A pause. Then the faintest sound. A sharp inhale. Whoever it was, he was listening too. I didn't think. I just moved. I leapt out of bed, slammed my bedroom door shut, and locked it just as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Silence. For one long, agonizing moment, there was nothing. No movement, no breathing, just the sound of my own pulse pounding in my ears. Then, from the other side of the door, a knock, a slow, rhythmic knock, followed by a whisper. "You can't stay in there forever." My stomach twisted. His voice was low, almost playful, like he was enjoying this. I backed away, my hands shaking. The window. I rushed to it, fumbling with the lock. It was old, rusted. I had barely ever opened it. Behind me, the whispering continued. "You think this door will stop me?" Crack. The door frame splintered. I twisted the lock, yanked the window open just as the door exploded inward. I didn't look back. I threw myself out. I landed hard in my backyard, pain jolting at my ankle. Behind me, I heard him laugh. I scrambled to my feet, limping, sprinting toward my neighbor's house. She was older, lived alone. She was the only one who might be awake this late. I banged on her door, gasping for breath. She answered within seconds, her eyes wide with shock. "What's wrong?" There's someone in my house," I stammered. She didn't hesitate. She pulled me inside, locked the door, and called the police. I watched through her window, every muscle in my body tight. But when the cops arrived, the house was empty. The front door was wide open. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, no him. The police checked everything. My room was wrecked. The broken door, the open window, but nothing was stolen. "Looks like a break-in," one of the officers said, scratching his head. "Maybe he panicked when you got away." But something felt off. It wasn't just a robbery. He didn't take anything. He didn't even try to. He just wanted me scared. I stayed with my neighbor that night. Couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow outside sent my heart racing. By morning, I convinced myself it was over, until I went back home and found the note. It was waiting on my kitchen counter, a single sheet of paper, written in my handwriting. "I let you go this time. Next time I won't." My blood ran cold. I hadn't written that. I would never write that. But the loops, the slants, it was exactly like my own. The police thought it was a joke. "Maybe he copied your handwriting," one of them said. "Or maybe you wrote it down and forgot." I didn't forget, and I didn't write it. They never found him. The cameras at my neighbor's house showed nothing. No one chasing me, no one breaking down my door. I tried to move on. I had the locks changed, put in cameras, alarms, motion detectors, but I never felt safe. Then, a week later, I found another note. This time, it was tucked under my pillow. Getting lazy. You didn't even wake up. I couldn't breathe. He'd been inside again. The police found nothing. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. The locks were still dead-bolted. The cameras didn't record anything. It didn't make sense. None of it did. I left town, moved in with my sister 2 states over. For a while, things were quiet. Then, one night, she woke up to find a note on her nightstand, in my handwriting. "You can't run." That was 3 months ago. Now I don't sleep much anymore. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear knocking. I've worked the night shift at Grady's Gas and Go for 3 years now. It's a small, rundown place off Highway 19 just outside of town. The kind of gas station where the coffee's burnt, the fluorescent lights flicker, and the only customers past midnight are truckers, drunks, and the occasional creep, looking for a quiet place to exist. I don't mind the job. It's boring, mostly, but boring is good. At least that's what I used to think. I don't think that anymore. That night was slow, like most Tuesday nights. The security cameras buzzed on their little screens behind the counter. I watched them absently, leaning on the register. 12:37 a.m. The place was empty except for a single sedan parked by Pump 4. A guy had come in to pay cash for his gas, but other than that, I hadn't seen another soul for almost an hour. I like nights like this. No drunk teenagers knocking over the chip rack, no tweakers trying to stuff beer cans into their hoodies. Just the hum of the coolers, the distant chirp of a cricket outside, and me, counting down the hours until sunrise. I thought it was going to be an easy shift. Then the bell above the door jingled. At first, I didn't look up. I was restocking the cigarette shelf behind the counter, only half paying attention. "Evening," I called without turning. No response. That's what made me look. He was standing just inside the doorway, not moving, dressed in all black, hood up. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't looking at the fridges or the shelves. He was just standing there, watching me. My stomach tightened. "Can I help you?" I asked. Still nothing. The door slowly creaked shut behind him, and then, finally, he moved. Not toward the shelves, not toward the coolers, toward me. A bad feeling. I've dealt with weirdos before. You work the graveyard shift at a gas station. You get used to it. But something about this guy felt different. There was a purpose to the way he walked. Slow, deliberate steps. I glanced at the monitors behind me, watching him on the grainy security feed. His movements were stiff, controlled, like he was thinking, like he was deciding something. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You looking for anything specific?" His head tilted slightly, like he was considering the question. And then finally, he spoke. "You alone?" I forced a laugh. "Nah, my manager's in the back." "Lieutenant." His mouth twitched, just a little. He didn't believe me. I saw it before he even pulled it out. The way his hand dipped into his hoodie pocket. The way his fingers curled around something heavy. I had just enough time to move. I ducked behind the counter just as he yanked the gun free. A sharp bang. Glass shattered behind me. The bastard shot at me. I scrambled on my hands and knees, heart slamming against my ribs. The cigarette cartons rained down as I knocked into the shelf, crawling toward the emergency panic button under the register. Another shot. The screen of the lottery machine exploded in a spray of sparks. I slapped my palm against the button, praying that the silent alarm actually worked. And then, click. Silence. I peeked over the counter. The man was staring at his gun. He tried the trigger again. Click. The gun had jammed. For half a second, neither of us moved. Then I ran. I sprinted toward the storeroom, shoving through the metal door and slamming it shut behind me. There was no lock. My hands fumbled for something, anything I could use to block it. There, a metal shelf. I threw my weight against it, pushing it against the door just as he slammed into it from the other side. The whole thing rattled violently. I stumbled back, gasping. I needed a way out. The storeroom was small. Concrete walls, a single flickering light, one door, one window, too high to climb. Another slam against the door. I spun in circles looking for something, a weapon, a way out, anything. Then, silence. No more pounding fists, no more rattling. Just the sound of my own breath, sharp and ragged. I waited. Nothing. I don't know how long I stood there, pressed against the wall, waiting, listening. Then, a noise. Not from the door, from inside the room. A soft scrape, like a shoe sliding against the floor. My breath caught. I turned my head slowly. The metal shelf was still against the door, but the vent in the ceiling, it was open. He was inside with me. I bolted for the shelf. If I could just move it. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I screamed, twisting away. His fingers clawed at my hoodie, yanking me back. I lashed out wildly, my elbow catching him in the ribs. He grunted, stumbling back, just enough for me to grab the nearest thing, a glass bottle of window cleaner. I swung it hard. It shattered against his face. A howl of pain. I didn't wait. I shoved the shelf aside, throwing open the door and running. I didn't stop until I was outside, breath steaming in the cold night air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. The siren of a police cruiser getting closer. I turned, expecting him to be right behind me. But he wasn't. He was gone. Vanished, as if he had never been there at all. The cops searched the store. No sign of him. Nothing on the cameras. No footprints in the storeroom dust. The only proof he existed at all, the broken glass and the bruise on my shoulder where he had grabbed me. They never found him. The cops said it was probably a junkie, a failed robbery attempt, that I was lucky. I quit the next day, couldn't go back. But a week later, I found something tucked under my apartment door, a scrap of receipt paper, scrawled in smeared ink and shaky handwriting. Next time, you won't be so lucky. I've been a cop for 8 years now. I've seen a lot. Domestic disputes, gang fights, bodies pulled from rivers. But nothing ever really scared me. Not until that night. It was supposed to be a simple call, just another routine dispatch. Possible mugging in progress. Oak Ridge Park. Suspect in dark clothing. Proceed with caution. I remember exchanging a glance with my partner, Miles. He gave me a smirk as he started the car. "Park's empty this time of night," he said. "Bet it's just some drunk harassing joggers." I nodded, but I had a strange feeling in my gut. Something about the call didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was how calm the dispatcher sounded. Or maybe it was the fact that Oak Ridge Park had been completely deserted for months. There had been rumors, people disappearing, people seeing things, but I didn't believe in that kind of crap. I should have. Oak Ridge Park was pitch black when we pulled up. The streetlights near the entrance barely cast enough glow to illuminate the old metal gates. Miles and I stepped out of the cruiser, scanning the area. The air was thick, damp, smelling of wet leaves and dirt. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches curling into the sky like skeletal fingers. We heard nothing. No voices, no footsteps, no rustling in the bushes. Just silence. Miles clicked on his flashlight. Looks abandoned. I felt that tight pull in my stomach again. "We should do a sweep," I said. He sighed but nodded. We entered the park. We walked side by side down the main path, the crunch of gravel beneath our boots the only sound in the emptiness. The trees thickened the deeper we went, their shadows stretching long across the path, twisting like ink blots. 5 minutes passed. 10. Nothing. Just as I was about to suggest heading back, Miles held up a hand. "Wait." I froze. He angled his flashlight toward the trees. A jacket. Dark, torn, hanging from a low branch, swaying gently in the breeze. Underneath it, the ground was wet. At first I thought it was rainwater,
Then I saw the color, a deep dark red, blood, fresh. My radio crackled. Unit 12, update on the Oak Ridge call. I reached for my radio. Before I could respond, something moved in the trees. A blur of darkness, darting between the trunks. Too fast to be an animal, too deliberate to be the wind. Miles saw it too. "Hey, police." He unholstered his weapon. "Step out slowly." No response. Then, a flash of movement. A shadow streaked across the clearing, running. "Shit, he's bolting," Miles shouted. We took off after him. The suspect was fast, too fast. He wove between trees like he'd been living in these woods his whole life. Branches whipped at my face as we ran. My breath came in harsh, ragged gasps. I caught glimpses of him. Dark clothing, hunched posture, long limbs that didn't move quite right. We chased him deeper into the park, where the trees swallowed what little light remained. My flashlight flickered. Miles was just ahead, keeping pace, his breathing steady. "Stop," he bellowed. "You're only making this worse for yourself." The suspect didn't stop. If anything, he ran faster, and then he vanished. 1 second, he was there, his silhouette outlined against the trees. The next, gone. We slowed to a stop, panting. I swung my flashlight over the trees, over the ground, over the empty space where the man should have been. Nothing. I turned to Miles, my chest rising and falling. Where the hell did he go? Miles shook his head, eyes darting around. He was rattled. So was I. Something about the way that guy ran, the way he just disappeared, felt wrong. We stood in the darkness, listening. The park was still. Too still. No crickets, no wind, just the distant sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. And then, a whisper, right behind me. I spun around, gun raised. No one was there, but I had heard it. A breath, a voice, low and raspy, like dry leaves rustling. Miles caught my eye, his expression tense. "You heard that?" he whispered. I nodded slowly. We backed up, standing shoulder to shoulder. My radio crackled again. Unit 12, status check. I grabbed it, my voice unsteady. "This is Unit 12. We..." Static. A long, deep hiss of static. Then beneath it, a voice. Faint. Barely above a whisper. "Run." The radio went dead. Branches snapped. Leaves rustled. Something moved behind us. We turned just in time to see him. Not running. Not hiding. Standing. Watching. I saw his face in the flashlight beam. Or rather, I didn't. No eyes. No mouth. Just smooth, stretched skin where features should have been. And his arms. Too long. Too thin. The moment I processed what I was seeing, he lunged. I fired. So did Miles. The shots did nothing. He moved through them. Like smoke. Like shadow. And then, pain. A burning, searing pain in my chest. As something hit me. I went down hard. The last thing I heard before I blacked out was Miles screaming.
I woke up in my cruiser. The sun was rising. Birds chirped. The park was quiet. I turned to the driver's seat. Empty. "Miles?" My voice was raw. No answer. I stumbled out of the car, my whole body aching. My uniform was ripped. My chest was bruised. I turned in a slow circle, my heart pounding. Miles was gone. I called it in. Backup arrived within minutes. They found my gun, my flashlight, but not Miles, not a single trace of him. A week later, they found something near the park entrance, a scrap of fabric, and written on it, in smeared, dark red letters, "You never caught me."